Hello and welcome to Crofting Matters. My name is Osla Jamwal Fraser and this is the podcast where we discuss the things that matter in crofting. Over the next few episodes, I'll be bringing you Crofting Matters from Shetland. Today I'm joined by two fascinating guests. Eunson, who was born and raised on her family croft in Fair Isle and who is now a designer and maker of Fair Isle strawback chairs. We're also joined by Ewen Balfour, who is a crofter and quantity surveyor, and is also a master craftsman in Shetland basket making.
It's a landrace crop, so it's kind of what would be termed black oats, I think. It's a Latin name, of course, Avena strigosa is the Latin name, I understand. But it's been grown, well, I imagine originally all over Europe. It would have been a common thing at one time through history, but certainly been in Shetland for a long, long time. My lifetime then, it's likely something that's become less common to have grown in bigger quantities, that's for sure. You can never tell when it might be handy still to have that landrace in existence. I mean, you can be, I suppose you could say, well, it's a sentimental kind of historic thing, but it might someday prove to be really very valuable to have something that you can identify that's being cultivated kind of in isolation, more or less, in island areas or remote areas. In the future, sometime that could be important to have.
I think just with this building in interest in straw crafts, it just became really clear that we needed something a little bit more than just this winter straw group. We needed to kind of create an organisation that could act for everybody that's involved in straw and straw production.
We're going to hear from them about work that they're part of to preserve Shetland's endangered straw crafts and one of our ancient land races, Shetland's black oats, referred to locally as Aets. Hello and welcome, Eve and Ewen, and thank you both very much for joining us today. Eve, you grew up in Fair Isle and are now one of the people making Fair Isle strawback chairs. Can you tell us a pretty bit about yourself and how you got involved with your strawy adventure?
Yep, so I was born and raised in Fair Isle. It's where I grew up and where all my family came from. We left there when I was a teenager and now I'm based out in Shetland. I've been away, I've studied architecture, I've done various things, and then at some point in my life I decided I needed to do something a little bit different and ended up doing a massive research project into traditional Fair Isle chairs. That was all the chair types, not just the strawbacks, but through that research we sort of realised that the Fair Isle strawback was really unique, very different from the Orkney strawbacks, which most people will know. So it uses a different method of fixing the straw together.
For people who maybe don't know what a strawback chair is, can you just explain what that is?
Yeah, so a strawback chair is traditional to the Northern Isles, so Shetland and Orkney, and it's a wooden chair frame for the base, and then it has a tall back that's made of coiled straw, so it's sort of like half a basket, and it's really tall, and they're generally made out of timber that came from the beach and was salvaged, and oats that are grown on the crofts.
And how was it that your Fair Isle childhood brought you to be interested in that?
I don't know. I was brought up with all of these chairs around me, so it was very much part of my upbringing. And I was brought up with my 80-year-old granduncle, and he would, tell you stories about which ships that the wood came from for the chairs and things like that. So it had a really long history with me. But I think anything traditional to Fair Isle is really close to my heart. So it was just a really good way of connecting back to my childhood and a way of getting to go back to Fair Isle to do that research.
Ewen, what's your background in crofting and how did you come to the straw craft?
when I was born, then we first lived in Shulham, North Mavin. And then we moved to Bray shortly after that. My mum and dad, but both of them had roots in the North Mavin area. I suppose that's where Dad was brought up on the Croft there, and Mum, her family was from Ewen, so that's the two kind of sides of the family. But yeah, we bade in Bray all the rest of my upbringing. And then I got to the Larwick School, of course, and then down to Aberdeen to University and studied quantity surveying. The straw side of things, kizzy making really is what I was first interested in. I suppose that you were likely always aware of what the basket was, but you was never made one. But for some reason I wanted to make one. And I ended up going to a night class, as you did back then. We let Lowry Coupland at North Row. So that was, I think, one of their only night classes. And he'd started that, I think it was actually maybe in the 70s. But one of the reasons that had come about was he always used to put this basket into the local sale of work. And it was raising funds for various things. And the head teacher at the time thought, oh, this would be a interesting thing to learn how to do. So the first night class, as I understand, was really just for around the place. And Lowry was teaching them how to make kishies, and that carried on for many, many years until I got the chance to go.
And again, for listeners that's maybe no aware of what straw crafts, what is a kishie, Ewen?
A traditional straw basket, and it's fastened together with a twine that you make yourself out, or either the oats straw itself, floss, which is a soft rush, bent, that's the marram grass. Any of that kind of materials can be dried and used as cordage once they're twisted together, and then you use Shetland Aets really is what we learned with, because it is quality suitable to manufacture that particular kind of basket. And of course, once they were finished, you see them in tons of photos, Shetland photos, black and white postcard, the kind of typical one of the women with their knitting and the kishies on their backs full of pits. So that's one of the uses they were used for, but they really were used for carrying everything, because it would have been for the days a wheelbarrow even wouldn't have been a common thing, but they were first being used.
We are obviously looking today at some of the Shetland straw crafts that are critically endangered, and the particular expression of them in Shetland. But a lot of these crafts are their shared heritage, particularly with the Western Isles, but also with other areas in Scotland. So hopefully some of our listeners will also have their own dialect names for things that are similar to a back basket that we would call a kishie. Mm-hmm. You mentioned there, Ewen, Shetland Aets, and I know that you do have a family croft. Can you tell us a pretty bit about what Shetland Aets are and your own experience of growing them?
Yeah, it's a landrace crop, so it's kind of what would be termed black oats, I think. Has a Latin name, of course, Shetlandstrawsociety strigosa is the Latin name, I understand. But it's been grown, well, I imagine originally all over Europe. It would have been a common thing at one time back through history, but certainly been in Shetland for a long, long time. My lifetime, then it's likely something that's become less common to have grown in bigger quantities, that's for sure. And so now it's in a kind of, I suppose you'd say, precarious position. The crafting has completely changed, I suppose, over that recent decades. And because Shetland Aets doesn't have a high yield cereal, so if that's what you're looking for, then that's probably not the thing to be grown. And the straw length is shorter, so it's a different variety, like the same type of thing. But obviously that has its attractions. If you're wanting cereals, then that's what you're going to need to get.
And Eve, you have been at the forefront of some initial research into what Shetland Aets are. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, so we have done some DNA analysis basically on samples that we collected throughout Shetland. And also from Orkney, Western Isles, through the seed banks throughout the UK and European samples as well. So that was exciting to do. We got results back and we're sort of still waiting on analysis on that. But it's quite nice to see that certainly the oat stock that we've had in Shetland and have been growing in Shetland for however long is that it sits very comfortably in its own sort of group, but also similar to the Western Isles and Orkney seed stocks as well. So the main thing for me to do this analysis was to make sure that when we were trying to multiply our seed stock, which is really important for us to get more people growing and to get more straw available for doing crafts and thatching and different things like that, then just to make sure that whatever we were multiplying was correct, because you can buy a Venus strigosa off, from seed suppliers off the internet, no problem at all, and that will be produced in places like South America or much further afield.
So when you have the results back from that piece of research, you're really looking to just kind of confirm that what you're multiplying and trying to preserve is the correct thing to be preserving. Again, I think a lot of our listeners will probably identify with that. A lot of the crofters in the Western Isles are still cropping varieties of black oats and bear on the Macher, and again, it's a lot of shared heritage there. When we speak about growing Shetland Aets new or black oats or whatever we want to call them, what are some of the challenges that we're facing, Eve?
I think particularly as Ewen was saying in Shetland, I mean it's not a great crop in terms of yield. So anybody that's growing this is doing it because they want to, because they've maybe got a passion for heritage crofting. I mean it is good fodder, isn't it, for animals as well, and obviously there's a demand in basketry and stuff. So, but there's not a big payout at the end of it, and it's a lot of hard work, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge. There are challenges in terms of pests as well, and birds are probably the number one culprit, and there are people that have lost their seed stock just because of a flock of sparrows has come down just at the wrong point and they haven't been able to harvest in time. So yeah, and then the weather. How long have you got getting harvesting in time? I think that's probably one of the hardest things. You can grow a field of Aets, but getting them indoors before they're flattened can be an issue. So there's lots of challenges, but very rewarding.
Yeah, there's lots of challenges that again across the crofts and counties will be shared, but I do think it's important to highlight we are at 60 degrees north, and all of those sort of shared Scottish growing challenges are they're really amplified to the nth degree in Shetland, that we have such a short growing season and such a difficult, I suppose, climate and land capability for cropping at all. Why do we think it's important to preserve that landrace though, Ewen?
I would say that it's landracing might be it. You can never tell when it might be handy still to have that landrace in existence. I mean, you can be, I suppose you could say, well, it's a sentimental kind of historic thing, but it might someday prove to be really very valuable to have something that you can identify that's been cultivated kind of in isolation, more or less, in island areas or remote areas. In the future, sometime that could be important to have. Plus, well, purely for a point of view of what we're using it for, there's not really that many other materials that you can do the same things that we want to do with it. For the basket making, chair making, thatching, all that things what we have here seems to work pretty well in this environment or for the end use that we want to put it to. So, yeah, I would say that's pretty good reasons, even if you disregard the kind of slightly historic side of it. It's still worthwhile keeping that. I would argue.
No, I think I would agree with what Ewan says, and yeah, particularly that it is a really, really good material for what we're looking at, and particularly I think we're going to be doing a lot of thatching, hopefully, and it's really I think the only material for thatching in Shetland, and Shetland's got a very sort of specific thatching method, which will vary from other places throughout Scotland. So yeah, it's definitely important that we have it and have it in quantities. And from a biodiversity point of view as well, from wildlife and stuff as well, like we want to see more crops, in general.
Yeah, more diversity in what people are producing. I think it's really important. And I think it's also important that we in Shetland kind of recognise that it's part of maybe not exactly the same strain of black oats, but black oats is still very much an important crop in the Western Isles. And the reason why it's important is because it does perform quite well on marginal land, and it can cope with mineral deficiencies that other crops can't cope with. And as Ewan said, we never know when that might come in really handy. I mean, climate change is going to hit us much faster than I think anyone is prepared for. So it's really important that we make sure that agricultural biodiversity is really maintained as well. Coming back to the heritage crafts that we're talking about, we've talked about kishy making, that sort of back basket in Shetland, and the Fair Isle strawback chairs, and you've mentioned thatching. There are a variety of other straw crafts of coiled basket making and skeckler costumes, which are again in maybe slightly different forms, straw guising costumes that you would find elsewhere in Scotland as well. Are all of those crafts, would you say, critically endangered, Eve?
Yes, they are definitely all critically endangered. I think there's only one. So in Shetland, they're all critically endangered. In Orkney, you would have your strawback chair making there, and their strawbacks would be considered a viable craft just because there is a big demand for that. And the straw that they're using, they are growing it, so it's not so difficult to get your hands on that material, the raw materials for that craft. But yeah, all of the Shetland sort of traditional crafts that you've mentioned there are firmly on the red list.
And can you tell us what the red list is and why it's important for those crafts to be listed there?
Yeah, the Heritage Crafts Association created a red list of critically endangered crafts, and I think about 2017. And so basically they looked at lots of different UK crafts and recorded how many people were practicing it, how many people were making a living out of it, and ultimately decided on whether it was a viable craft, as in it would go forward into the future, or whether it was in danger of dying out and the skills being lost. So they did some amazing work and it's really worth having a look at that and going online and looking at the UK's red list and seeing what's on there. Some brilliant stuff, but they continue to add to it and they continue to update it. So if a craft, and it's raised a huge amount of awareness in heritage crafts, like them creating the red list. So there's been a lot of uptake in these crafts, and some of them have made their way, out of red and into amber and, into green, and, are now considered viable, which is brilliant.
And you are both involved in a new organisation, the Shetland Straw Society. You're both involved in setting that up. Do you want to talk about where that idea has come from, how it started, what you hope to achieve with it?
I started doing straw basket classes, winter straw group, in 2022, I think it was. Just on the back of, I think, my chairs project, and there seemed to be a lot of interest in straw crafts. There wasn't much happening. So with the Shetland Museum and Archives, we organised a sort of open evening with a talk, and expected a few people to, come round, and maybe we would get some people to sign up. And we ended up with 90 folk coming, and we had to get out a lot more chairs than we'd expected. And there was a really good uptake in workshops after that, and it's rolled on every winter since. And I think just with this building in interest in straw crafts, it just became really clear that we needed something a little bit more than just this winter straw group. We needed to kind of create an organisation that could act for everybody that's involved in straw and straw production. So it's our aim is to be an umbrella organisation that will, help facilitate whatever for whoever, whether that's straw crafters, straw growers, folk with interest in old binders, or whatever it might be. We'd like to just create a organisation that can help kind of facilitate whatever projects are going on.
Ewen, the number of folk growing Aets in Shetland now has grown a little bit as paired to this project. Do you have any idea how many folk now are growing Aets and how they're getting on with it?
I don't know precisely. I mean, probably Eve has a better idea of that as me, because she's been dishing out bags of seed to various folk, but it's certainly improved a lot from what it was even 5 years ago, I would have said. But as well, I think a lot of that has come on the back of what Eve has just been saying, where you get folk. Some folk just want to come to classes, they want to learn to make whatever it is that you're teaching them, and that's fine. But there are other folk that is maybe not been aware until they did that, of where the materials come from, and they have an interest in growing things, and that's brilliant, because if you don't have a variety of folk growing, then obviously what happens or can happen is that you have a couple of folk as a poor year, they didn't get their seed stock for the next year, or maybe for the previous year. It has a knock-on effect, and then you end up with not enough seed to go around, and that can very quickly turn into a situation where you don't have any seed. But it's certainly an awful lot better as what it used to be. But you need a mix. Some folk doesn't grow big areas, and that's fine, but you do need enough seed being generated every year to go around, and to try and make sure it continues, that you still have that stock existing somewhere.
Probably when I first started looking at this was around 2020, and I reckon there was maybe half a dozen folk that were growing, and it was very small areas, like enough to get the plough out, but there might have been a quarter or up to an acre full stop being grown, like in total throughout Shetland. And as I spoke to folk, I would phone up and say, "Oh, do you grow Aets?" And they say, "Oh, no, I've given up, but have you tried such and such?" And I'd phone them and they'd say, no, I've given up. Have you tried such and such? I was like, yeah, I've just spoken to them. And they just, so you were getting situations where folk thought that people were keeping it going, but actually it wasn't happening. So this year now, so we did some multiplication over the last few years, and I was really impressed at how little, like how far a small handful can go. Like you start off at one handful one year, but you've got a full kind of bag full by the next, and then that's it. You're away then, and you've got, you know, kilos and kilos of it. So that was really good. We've probably got about, I'd say about 20 folk growing this year. That's in addition to those that would have been growing already. So there was, you know, your sort of hardcore half a dozen, and then we've probably got about 20 new growers. And that's everything from a pretty 6 metre plot in your garden, just focusing on multiplying and keeping the birds off and multiplying seed, to much bigger areas, sort of 1/4 acre at a time. So very excited to see how that goes. The crunch will come at harvest time. That's going to be when the hard work kicks in. So we'll see what we get back.
I think this project is also really interesting because it highlights how interconnected a lot of things are in communities like ours. I think a lot of people, when the straw group maybe started, people thought about straw crafts, but they didn't necessarily link that back to, well, where does the straw come from, and why it's important that we have crofters that are actively interested in the straw crafts and keeping them alive, and also keeping the seed multiplied, and keeping everything is so interwoven that if you lose one part of it, then you lose the whole lot. And there's so much that's bound up in that's to do with our relationship with land and our relationship with the environment that we live in, but also our cultural identity. And as Ewan mentioned, all the photos that you can look back at of old Shetland photos where the kishy is just an integral part of what we identify with as part of our cultural heritage. But if we lose the materials to make it, then we also lose the skills to make them, and the knowledge that goes with that. Do you think that when you first got involved with, for you, Ewan, learning how to make a kishy, or for you, Eve, learning how to make a straw-back chair, that you fully understood yourselves at that stage what you were getting involved in? Or has it kind of grown arms and legs that you didn't envisage?
Yeah, I would say that's for sure, because I mean you turned up kind of at the night class, as I was saying, and Laura, you opened the boot of the car, and there was all the stray ready for using. So it was only once you started, kind of, I was interested obviously in growing it as well, and he was kind of an older man, so you could, well, I just was interested in doing it. So it's only once you start growing it, then you, like Eve says, you really do appreciate what Laurie was doing.
Yeah, it definitely snowballed for me with my little chairs project through to growing oats, DNA testing. None of these things I think I would ever have expected to have gone down these rabbit holes from the little project that I set out on in the first place. But it's absolutely fascinating, and the amount of different people that you're connecting with on so many different, you know, like from so many different walks of life with so many different levels of interest in it. It's just, yeah, absolutely fascinating.
And one of the first things that the Straw Society has been focusing on doing is getting some of these crafts listed on the UNESCO Inventory of Living Heritage. Eve, can you tell us a little bit about what that Inventory of Living Heritage is, and what things you have put in as applications to be included in it?
Yeah, so it's a little bit like the red list in my mind. That's how, a bit like how that works. So the red list is actually crafts, but the inventory of intangible cultural heritage, or living heritage as we're calling it, is it's I suppose the untouchable, the intangible heritage of the UK, and a lot of the crafting skills and practices fall into that. So we have listed a nice one is Shetland, so that's the guising suits and the culture around guising, but then also all the different straw craft, basketry crafts. So, well, the chair making, the stitched coiled straw, the kishy making. And Shetland Amenity Trust put in an overview of crofting practices in general as one of the listings. So hopefully that will get expanded upon in the future.
And just because you've touched on it there, I think it would be a really nice at this point to have, sort of talk about skeckling a little bit. Ewen, you are a renowned skeckler, I believe. Can you describe for the listeners, like, what is a skeckler suit and what does skeckling involve?
Yeah, I couldn't comment on my involvement, obviously, because that would ruin the fun for everybody. But yeah, I understand it to be costumes really made out of stray. So you have, for anybody that's not met a skeckler, there are various parts of the costume. If you're starting for the bottom of your body upwards, then there's gaiters that you can wear below your knees. So this is all made out of what we're calling Shetland Aets, bound together in a similar fashion to what cages would be. So the gaiters is below the knee, then there's like a skirt. So that's obviously a waist thing. There's a cape that has a hole in it, made in a circle, but has a hole in the center, so it looks like a poncho kind of idea. Goes on over your head. And then the hat. And the hat is the sort of the top of the part of the costume. So, and then the hat is pulled down over your head. So you have to look through the stray that's in front of you. It's not very easy. You don't have any peripheral vision at all when you have this thing on. So, and then as well, key to the whole thing is the music. So that would be a fiddler. And they play the music. You, in older times, you'd have gone into somebody's house, usually at Halloween time of year, or at New Year, and also weddings. Really, I suppose you were there to bring them luck. There would have been superstitions associated with it, but that was what you were doing. So they couldn't refuse entry to their property. And if they did, that would be considered bad luck, of course. So it has lots of roots in Norse history. There's been plenty of documented evidence of it in other Scandinavian countries, and the same will be, well, I think even in like Ireland, they have straw hats that are very similar to the ones we would have here. So yeah, this group of folk comes into the house. They usually ask for some notional payment. So that's the kind of key elements, I think, of it. But we're seeing the skecklers has made a reappearance in more recent times, and they seem to be broadening their horizons out into their functions out the side. So you can never tell where they might appear. And they've got a very dedicated musician that they seem to drag around with them, Gad Morris. So you might easily meet them sometime if you're up here or around about the nights. Probably in the winter time, not just now. There's no darkness, so they'll be having a rest somewhere.
It's difficult to be unidentifiable when there's not enough darkness around.
Yeah.
It's possibly one of the really good fun side effects of having a Shetland Straw Society is the sort of resurgence of skeckling, and it's a lot more present at a lot of different local events now. On a kind of closing note, there might be a lot of folk listening to this that either want to learn more about straw crafts or black oats, or how to cultivate them. They might want to get involved, or they might be looking at similar issues in their own areas with completely different heritage crafts. What would be your top tips for either getting involved or learning more, or from your own experiences of starting out in this, what would you advise to people?
Yeah, you can speak to any wish that's involved in the group would be the first, or come along, even if because Eve will be going to advertise classes for this coming winter. But they'll be back there. They'll be very happy to welcome you and speak to you about anything to do with stray, that's for sure.
Eve, would I be right in saying that you were also involved in a book that people can get their hands on?
The Lewis Walpole's Kishies and Cuddies book, which is a really, really good Shetland basketry book. Like, she did a brilliant job of researching all types of Shetland basketry. So that's not just straw related. There's lots of different materials that's used there. So that's available directly from Lewis. So Google Lewis Walpole Kishies and Cuddies and to find that one. So if anybody wanted to get in touch with us and find out anything else about straw or has any questions, then you can email shetlandstrawsociety@gmail.com.
Thanks so much to you, Eve, and to you, Ewan, for agreeing to be part of this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks so much to Eve and Ewan for joining us today and sharing their knowledge and experience. And the very best of luck to the Shetland Straw Society. If you enjoyed this episode of Crofting Matters, please do subscribe to hear the next episode, when we'll be joined by crofters who work in aquaculture in Shetland to discuss the connections between crofting, fisheries and aquaculture in our island communities. If you would like to find out more about anything we discussed today, you'll find links in the show notes. Thanks to our producer, Kerry Hammond, our editor, Kieran Sim, and thanks to you for tuning in. This podcast was produced in association with the Scottish Government.
The Farm Advisory Service Podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.